evening. You're watching Arirang News at 8. It's Friday, December 20th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with harsh rhetoric out of Pyongyang. This time, it has threatened to launch an attack on Seoul without notice, a wording that prompted the South Korean government to say it would sternly react to any provocations. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has this report.
A fresh warning out of North Korea is turning up the heat on inter-Korean relations. Seoul's defense ministry has confirmed that Pyongyang sent a threat to South Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade on Thursday through a joint military hotline at the West Sea. The message sent from the North's National Defense Commission says, quote, "If South Korea continues provocative acts against the state's highest dignity, it will retaliate ruthlessly without a warning." The highest dignity refers to the state's leader, Kim Jong-un. South Korean conservative groups staged large street rallies in downtown Seoul on Tuesday, protesting North Korea's authoritarian rule and human rights abuses. The protests were held to mark the second anniversary of the death of former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. In response to the threat, the South Korean government sent a warning back across the border, saying it would respond strongly to any provocation. Seoul's defense ministry had already strengthened its combat readiness earlier this month following the execution of Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek. North Korea also lashed out against South Korean President Park Geun-hye on Friday through its state-run media. Taking note of the one-year anniversary of President Park's Election Day victory, a Korean Central News Agency article titled "Sweet Promises, Bitter Reality" strongly denounced President Park for not keeping her campaign pledges and said she would be, quote-unquote, strictly judged by history. The piece went on to call President Park an illegal president who's suppressing anyone who asks for democracy and justice. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Amid fears over potential political instability in the north following the execution of Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek, last week, the U.S. government has expressed serious concerns over the growing uncertainties and the possibility of future provocations. Our Park Ji-won has more.
General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the U.S. military's Joint Chiefs of Staff, says a North Korean provocation could be in the works following the recent execution of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek.
These kind of internal actions by dictators are often a precursor to provocation to distract attention from what they're doing inside of that country. So yeah, if you're asking me, am I concerned? Absolutely.
Speaking at the same Pentagon press conference Thursday, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said North Korea's sudden removal of the once powerful Jang increases concerns about the North and deepens the suspicions of the regime's motives.
That nation is as closed as any nation in the world. There is no transparency. There is no interconnect to the outside world.
The execution of Jang is seen by experts as the biggest upheaval in North Korea since the regime conducted its third nuclear test in February. With Jang out of the picture, suspicions are rising about the path the North will take in the coming weeks and months. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea has decided to step up efforts to better prepare for any possible scenario on the Korean Peninsula. It has decided to set up a standing committee and a secretariat of the National Security Council to make security meetings a regular thing. Our presidential office correspondent, Jun-ju, has the details.
With the security situation on the Korean Peninsula becoming increasingly tense after the execution of Jang Song-taek, the Park administration has unveiled a new set of measures to strengthen the lineup of its National Security Office and the function of the National Security Council, or NSC. The government plans to revise the law to set up a standing committee and a secretariat of the NSC. National Security Chief Kim Jang-soo will head the committee, which will be in charge of reviewing the government's foreign affairs and security-related policies once every week and devising measures to counter any pending issues. NSC meetings will be convened anytime the president thinks it is necessary. The NSC Secretariat, meanwhile, will systematically support the preparations and management of NSC or working level committee meetings.
We aim to create a system in which we can more actively and efficiently respond to the rapidly changing situation on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia by establishing a single-channel system for security-related meetings and a systematic decision-making process for security-related policies.
There are new positions that will be created under the National Security Chief, First and Second Deputy Directors. The First Deputy Director will head the NSC Secretariat, and the current Senior Presidential Secretary for Foreign Affairs and National Security will hold an additional position as the Second Deputy Director. The Office of the International Cooperation Secretary under the National Security Office will be changed into the Office of Policy Management Secretary, and the Office of Security Strategy Secretary will be newly created to set up mid to long-term security plans. The Presidential Office of Cheongwon says that it will work with the National Assembly to first revise the law to create the Committee and Secretariat of the NSC, which are expected to boost the role of the National Security Office as the country's security control tower. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
Year in and year out, the United Nations has passed a resolution condemning human rights abuses in North Korea and calling for change. Well, this year was no exception, especially with the execution of the second most powerful man in the North fresh in their minds. Our Shin Se-min reports.
The United Nations does not approve of the death penalty under any circumstances and is urging North Korea to release the tens of thousands of people who are being held as political prisoners. In a resolution adopted by consensus Wednesday, the UN General Assembly criticized the North Korean regime for its human rights abuses. It said Pyongyang is violating the civil, political, economic, and social rights of its people. This latest resolution follows the execution of Chang Song-taek earlier this month.
The United Nations has taken a very clear position that under any circumstances, United Nations is opposed to the imposition of a death penalty. This is a very fundamental human rights issues.
A North Korean delegate responded to the resolution by calling it a, quote, fabrication concocted by hostile forces. The resolution on human rights abuses is a regular occurrence each year and is designed to put more pressure on the North Korean regime. But it also holds no legal consequences. UN Secretary General Pan Ki-moon also warned that parties surrounding the Korean Peninsula must stay vigilant and tread carefully so as not to do anything impulsive. The General Assembly also adopted resolutions on Syria and Iran, expressing serious concerns about the human rights violations in those countries. But it welcomed recent pledges made by new Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to improve in some areas of human rights. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And moving now to the nationwide railway strike that rumbled into its 12th day on Friday. Union workers and the state-run Korea Railroad Corporation remain far apart on a compromise as the government is forging ahead with a plan that got the strike rolling in the first place. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
Thousands of unionized railway workers remained on strike Friday in protest of the government's move to set up a new rail operator that would run a new KTX bullet train from Suseok southern Seoul, which they claim is a first step toward privatizing the Korea Railroad Corporation. The Transport Ministry said Friday it will issue a license for the new rail service operator next week, backtracking slightly from an earlier plan to issue the license today. At the National Assembly on Friday, Finance Minister Han Ho-seok reiterated that setting up the Korail subsidiary unit was not aimed at privatization, but rather at improving services. The police, meanwhile, continued with its raids on the regional headquarters of Korea's Railway Workers Union on Friday, with court-issued warrants in hand, and arrested 2 of the 25 strike leaders. The walkout has crippled railway services nationwide, hitting cargo train services the hardest. Rail freight operations are running at 39% of normal levels, and passenger services are at 56% and 61% for the Saemaul and Mugunghwa trains. Roughly 7,800 union workers are currently on strike. Nearly 1,000 people returned to work after Korail issued an ultimatum ordering them back on the job by Thursday. Korail on Friday also filed a lawsuit claiming damages worth $7.3 million against the union and 186 strike leaders for business losses incurred by the firm over the past 12 days. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The National Assembly's Special Committee on Political Reform began discussions Friday on how to retool the local election system. The 18-member committee, headed by a ruling party lawmaker, decided the makeup of subcommittees aimed at improving school superintendent elections and overhauling a system that determines how political parties field candidates. The rival parties pledged to reform the local election system in the run-up to last year's presidential election to reduce the number of money for nomination scandals involving lawmakers. The Political Reform Committee will hold public hearings on the issue starting next week and plans to wrap up all the necessary legislative work by the end of January 2014.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join Arirang's Yoo Ji-hye for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. Arirang News. Every weeknight, live on Arirang TV.
A day after the U.S. Federal Reserve's announcement over its decision to scale back its bond-buying stimulus measures here in the nation, no major hiccups have been detected in the markets. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
There were fears of major capital outflows in Korea due to the U.S. Federal Reserve's decision to start tapering its bond-buying stimulus program. However, local stocks ended higher on Friday, with the benchmark Kospi rising 0.39% to close at 1,983.3. Analysts say the Fed's announcement helped reduce prolonged market uncertainties. They add the tapering indicates that the U.S. economy is on the track to recovery, something that will prompt investors to make riskier moves. Foreigners also extended their buying in Korea, scooping up a net 33.8 billion won, or roughly $32 million US. The governor of the Bank of Korea has also downplayed the effect of the Fed's tapering on the domestic market. Kim Jung-soo said in a meeting with the heads of local banks on Friday that local financial markets are doing well, weathering the impact of the Fed's stimulus tapering. He cited net buying on Korea's stock and bond markets after the Fed's announcement on Thursday. The local currency, meanwhile, fell against the greenback and closed at 1,061.2 won. Dealers mainly attributed the fall of the local currency to the rising value of the dollar. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
All that glitters might be gold, but the price of the precious metal has taken a massive hit this year, tumbling a staggering 26%. Despite the downward trend, the chance to buy gold at what some see as a knockdown price has sparked a gold rush here in Korea. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
To buy or to sell? That is always the question when it comes to gold. Right now in Korea, customers prefer to buy.
With Christmas and New Year coming up, many seasonal products are being released. Gold bars and seasonal pure gold products are selling well.
With global demand dropping to a 4-year low, Korean gold prices have plunged as well. The price fell from roughly $44 a gram in September to $39 this month. At the beginning of the year, the price was $56. Compared to last year, gold can be purchased at rates that are roughly 30% cheaper. In 2011, the price of gold hit a record high of $67, which is about 40% higher than the current figures. In one jewelry shop in central Seoul's Dongno district, 10 first birthday rings are sold each day, a drastic jump from years ago when it was just 2 rings a day on average. 24-carat rings are a traditional gift for Korean babies on their first birthdays, and their lower price tags these days are enabling more people to afford them. So why did the gold price drop this far?
The biggest reason for the drop in the price of gold is the beginning of the drawdown of quantitative easing, meaning it depends on whether the US dollar is strong or weak.
Economists say that due to expectations the Federal Reserve would begin tapering its quantitative easing program, the price of gold plunged in recent months. After the Fed's announcement Wednesday that it would start tapering its stimulus program, the global gold price dropped 3.5% to a 6-month low of just over $1,190 an ounce, or roughly $43 a gram. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The senior citizens in Korea are doing poorly. This according to a new government report that shows their poverty rate ranks the highest among OECD nations. The report also revealed other key livelihood factors such as average incomes and alcohol consumption. Paulie gives us a snapshot of life in Korea based on this new data.
New data released by Statistics Korea this week indicates Korea's elderly population is sinking further into poverty. According to the government agency, the relative poverty rate among senior citizens aged 65 and older nationwide stood at 46% in 2006. That figure rose to nearly 50% last year for elderly households earning less than half the median income. It's a stark contrast compared to the OECD average of about 13%, with Korea ranking the highest among 33 OECD member countries, followed by Australia and Mexico. Other population statistics reveal that the number of Korean workers earning less than the legal minimum wage shrank over the past 3 years. Approximately 1.7 million individuals were counted as part of the country's working poor last year, or about 9.6% of total workers, down from 12.8% in 2009. Consumption of alcohol was found to be high in Korea, with an average of 8 out of 10 men drinking at least once a month. Over 26% of men surveyed were found to binge drink more than twice a week, with 6.5% of women also taking part in high-risk drinking. Combined with high levels of reported stress, these conditions place a heavy burden on people's livelihoods. Data from the OECD ranks Korea 26 out of the 36 member nations in terms of overall life satisfaction. People from Switzerland were found to be the most satisfied with their lives, with Germany falling in the middle of the list. The figures represent significant challenges for the government to tackle in order to improve the quality of life here and ensure a sustainable future society. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And taking you overseas to the Philippines, 4 people were killed and another 5 injured when gunmen opened fire at Manila's main airport on Friday. The mayor of a southern Philippine town and his wife were among the dead. Authorities say the suspects were wearing police uniforms at the time of the attack and that they fled on motorcycles. They also believe the mayor, who has reportedly survived previous assassination attempts, was the intended target. No arrests have been made so far. An investigation is underway. And in London, scores of people were injured, some very seriously, after a ceiling collapsed at an historic London theater right in the middle of a performance. Akani Kim has the details.
London Ambulance Service says 76 people were injured after part of a ceiling in London's Apollo Theatre collapsed during a performance on Thursday evening, local time. That's a drop from an earlier estimate of 88. Authorities say their initial count was off due to the confusion of the situation. Many of the wounded were transported in 3 double-decker buses to a nearby hospital for treatment. Authorities say that while several people were very badly hurt, no one had suffered life-threatening injuries. The collapse occurred at around 8:15 p.m. local time when over 700 people were watching a performance of the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. Coming a week before Christmas, the Apollo Theatre, like many others in London, was packed to the brim with theatergoers. Witnesses say they heard a strange crackling noise before the collapse, but thought it was part of the show.
We just thought it was sound effects of the theatre, and then of the and then we just looked up and the whole ceiling was like slow motion, it just kind of came down.
Shaftesbury Avenue, where the Apollo is located, remains cordoned off by the authorities. About an hour before the ceiling collapse, London was hit by a heavy thunderstorm, but the exact cause of the incident in the 112-year-old theater is, as yet, unknown. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And back here in the nation, Christmas and New Year's are right around the corner, which usually means there's no shortage of concerts for classical music fans in Seoul. And according to our Kim Ji-yeon, this year is no different. And the place to be is the Seoul Arts Center.
Korea's all-time favorite New Age pianist Kuramoto Yuki and violinist Richard Yongjae O'Neill will be celebrating Christmas in Seoul together with a concert performance. They'll be playing some of Yuki's most popular pieces, such as Lake Louise and the famous Valtoy Full, the skater's waltz opus 183.
The Christmas gift this year to me will be that he's arranged some new works for piano and viola. So that's a wonderful, I can't think of a nicer gift for me as a musician to get some sort of new, beautiful repertoire by such a master.
The Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra, which holds one of the most popular end-of-the-year concerts in Korea, and conductor Chung Myung-hoon will feature Beethoven's Last Symphony No. 9 choral and other musical pieces in collaboration with soprano Kathleen Kim and tenor Alfred Kim, both from the New York-based Metropolitan Opera. Other world-renowned music stars such as soprano Im Sun-hae and violinist Clara Chun-mi-kang will perform at the Gangnam Symphony Orchestra New Year's concert at the Seoul Arts Center on January 17th. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Just weeks after Seoul issued the country's first ever fine dust alert, Korea again experienced high concentrations of fine and ultrafine dust from China on Friday. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, how bad is it now?
Well, Chi-hye, a preliminary fine dust watch was issued at 8 this morning, and it looks like it's going to continue for a while. Taking a look at the current conditions, well, the nation is at the edge of a high pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies across the map. So it looks like we will get back to our seasonal average temperature starting Sunday afternoon. However, as of now, Gyeonggi-do province is under a cold wave watch, not to mention that the East Coast and West Coast regions will continue to get more snow, about 1 to 3 centimeters starting later tonight through tomorrow morning. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul will start off the day at -7 degrees, but jumps to 3 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju peak at 6 and 5 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, snow showers are forecast overnight in Jeju with a daytime high of 7 degrees, all the while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 4 and -3 degrees respectively. Well, hope you have a wonderful Friday night, and here is the international weather.
that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. I'll be back with more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.